Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crime Cast. I'm Jamie here with John, who is very unsettled. Are you okay? You're just...
I got to make myself comfortable, you know?
Yeah,
so I muted the mics while we did the intro and just got, I'm in my zone now, so I'm good. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. Glad we got the Jared Fogle case out of the way last week. That was really hard to do just because of the content, and not that all of our cases don't have an element of discomfort, but that, if you've ever listened before, crimes against kids doesn't do me well.
Well, and I'm a psychopath, so I'm just over here like eating sandwiches while talking about it. I'm a different kind of, crazy. I've just been able to compartmentalize.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm able to do that through years of practice.
Yeah. Your job. I mean, it totally makes sense, but
I'm just suppressing my emotions until they explode in anger. Catch bless their hearts this week for how that happened in real life.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited to talk about that. Before we get started today, I want to give a big thanks to Purdy Cool, P-E-R-T-Y Cool. That's how you say pretty where we're from. Says it's 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It says, look forward to my Wednesday commute to work to listen to the new episodes. Y'all do a fantastic job with the details of each case without all the gore. So if my boys are in the car, it doesn't scare them. Keep up the great work. I guess pretty cool as a parent, and it's not like their friends in the car that they don't want to scare.
Yeah.
It's not my boys in the car.
My boys in the car.
I'm with my boys
as we go to work. That's a cool
cast.
It's a cool carpool situation.
Yeah, really appreciate that. Pretty cool. Thanks for the 5 stars. Also a great way to recommend new cases.
Man, I went through last night and wrote down some recommendations from the last couple of weeks, and there's a ton of them. So a lot of really good cases coming up thanks to you all. So please keep those coming. 5-star reviews are an excellent way. I also want to say thank you to a couple of people. We had 2 new Patreon members join since last week. We have Rebecca and Tyler Van. So Tyler and Rebecca, thank you both so much. I couldn't do this without you. And Jamie, Tyler paid a little extra to get a special shout out. So take the ball, man.
Tyler, your contribution is certainly, we don't expect contributions from anybody, but yours was absolutely above and beyond. And I really can't tell you how much we appreciate it. There have certainly been times when we've thought about folding and something like what Tyler brought in would come. And
I mean, I was writing my resignation letter to my own business last night, and Tyler's contribution came through, and I was like, I can't let him and Rebecca down.
All that to say, Tyler, you're keeping us here. We appreciate you.
And Rebecca, I know you, I appreciate you too, and I want you to know that. So thank you to all of our Patreon members. If you haven't checked it out, as little as $3 a month gets you a bonus episode each and every month, and all of our regular content from our weekly shows are over there early and ad-free. So go check it out.
Definitely ad-free. Sometimes the early sneaks up on us, but most of the time, 99%.
Yeah. But to be clear, the only thing we promise is the bonus episode, but we also try to do some more. I did see that Patreon has a live feature now, so we can go live with Patreon members. If that is something you are interested in, let us know. And if we get enough interest, we will do that.
Absolutely.
All right, Jamie, man, take me back to the 90s. Why don't you get the ball rolling? What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so we've covered a lot of pop culture crimes over the years, and today we're going to dive into the murder of Notorious B.I.G, who is a consensus one of the best rappers of all time. So we're going to talk about what happened. We've already covered Tupac, and maybe some of their relationship will come into this, but it's something that you remember being all over the news, but if you were my age at the time, you didn't get the details, so we're going to bring them today.
I don't remember the details, but I remember the tribute song that I think... Did Puff Daddy do that?
Yeah.
So we can't even talk about that anymore, so never mind.
Puff Daddy, for those of you youngins, is Diddy.
Yep,
Went
he
through several iterations.
officially canceled, and the sentence was given. And anyway, that will be another episode. But today, why don't we talk about Biggie Smalls?
No, Diddy. We're talking about Biggie. His name is Christopher George Latour Wallace.
I can see how they got Biggie out of that.
That's a big name. And he was born at Cumberland Hospital in Brooklyn, New York on May 21st of 1972. He was the only child of Jamaican immigrant parents. His mother, Valletta Wallace, was a preschool teacher, and his dad, Sulin George Latour, was a welder and a politician in Jamaica. His dad left the family when Biggie was just shy of 3 years old, so very much grew up without a father, and his mom had to work 2 jobs to give Biggie the best life that she could. He was raised in Brooklyn's Clinton Hill area, and his mom sent him to the Roman Catholic Bishop Laughlin Memorial High School. Why not make it the longest name possible since his name is too? But eventually he transferred over to Westinghouse High School, and that's also the school where Jay-Z and Busta Rhymes went.
Gosh, man, I used to love both of those guys, but Busta, for some reason, that was it for me.
Yeah. While he was in high school, Biggie weighed 200 pounds. 201 pounds is what this says, which earned him the nickname Big. You know, nowadays, I'm bigger than that.
I wonder, like, if that's not a typo, I wonder what they would have called me. Like, they called him Biggie, which at the time was probably not the most fun thing to hear about yourself, but what do they call me? Like old Husky John or extra Biggie?
I think they would have to make up a new word.
Oh, thanks, man. So his mama would save up her money every year, and in the summers she would take herself and Biggie to Jamaica to spend the summer, and while there, he would spend a lot of time with his Uncle Dave. So Uncle Dave would take him to the music scenes in Jamaica, and Biggie soaked it all in. He loved being around the music there in Jamaica. He did well in school, but he still decided to drop out when he was 17 because he was making more money selling drugs in his neighborhood than any career path that he saw in front of him. In fact, he'd been selling drugs since he was 12 years old, and he was working the streets near his home. So his mama would work long hours and had no idea what her son was up to. You know, she just probably thought he was being a good little boy and doing his homework. But no, he was out on the streets selling dope. After he dropped out of school, he was arrested on weapons charges. He was given 5 years probation. The year after that, he was charged with dealing cocaine. This would be in North Carolina, and he would spend 9 months in jail there while waiting to make bail.
Yeah, so certainly into some dangerous activity there. Just want to throw back to his size. I think the 200 pounds may have been elementary school.
I mean, when you're a 12-year-old 200-pound, I get it.
Yeah, I think that's where we're going back to. But it was, I don't know, you and I both went to schools that were like K through 12, right?
I mean, I saw the guy. We saw him on MTV back when they actually played music. And as an adult, he was more than 200 pounds.
Yeah,
I can confirm that.
300 plus. For sure. So in his early life, he listened to artists like the Dramatics, Blue Magic, Teddy Pendergrass, Stevie Wonder, and Marvin Gaye. And as he got older, he started listening to R&B and hip hop. He really got into Run DMC and LL Cool J. Ladies love Cool Jamie, I think is what that stands for. Just kidding. It's James.
Okay.
Biggie started rapping as a teenager, really just to entertain people. He thought he was good at it, and people seemed to give him attention when he did it, so just kind of did it for fun. After he got out of jail, though, he put together a demo tape, and he went under the name Biggie Smalls. He didn't really have plans to make a career out of music, but he thought it would be fun if he could get his tape out there and have other people listening to it. But that tape wound up at The Source magazine. They were so impressed that they profiled Biggie in their unsigned hype column in March of 1992. And like you said earlier, he was really good friends with Sean Combs, Puffy, Diddy, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever iteration
Papa Diddy Pop
you want to call it. But he got a hold of this article, did Diddy. And at the time, he was a producer at Uptown Records, and he sought out to get Biggie to sign up with him on his new label because he had a falling out with Uptown. He started Bad Boy Records, and he signed Biggie to his new label.
All right. So Biggie had two things to celebrate that summer. So along with that happening, his high school sweetheart and his girlfriend, Jan, gave birth to a baby girl. So that was his daughter. Her name was Tiana Dream Wallace. She was born on August 8th, 1993. And Biggie promised his daughter, quote, everything she wanted, end quote. He believed that if he had experienced the same support in his own childhood that he could offer her, then he maybe would have graduated and finished top of his class. Biggie was actually threatened later on that summer with legal action from someone already using the name Biggie Smalls. So he changed his stage name to Notorious B.I.G.
I think spelling's important here. His Biggie Smalls was BiggieSmalls. This one is Biggysmallz. So they sound the same. Obviously, the English language is terrible, but they, it was the same name essentially due to copyright. So he decided to go by something else.
If you noticed on our other podcast, Bless Their Hearts, I did a Country Boys as a title with the last letter being Z.
That wasn't approved by corporate. Just want to throw that out there.
Well, I'm half a corporate and I approved. A year later, August 4th, 1994, Biggie would marry an R&B singer named Faith Evans. Do you remember Faith Evans? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I didn't realize they were married, so I
clue.
learned that in researching this. So they had only met a few days prior, and that was at a Bad Boys photo shoot. And a month later, on September 13th, 1994, Biggie would release his debut album called Ready to Die. Now, I don't think I owned this album. Do you remember if you purchased this one?
I don't think I did. I didn't. This would have gotten me in trouble. I'll say that. My parents would not have approved of this.
I mean, I remember some of the songs, especially one we're going to talk about in a minute, but I did not buy this one, but I did use Napster to download a couple of his songs. Go check out that episode if you're not familiar. His album was certified gold in 2 months, double platinum the next year, and eventually went quadruple platinum.
That's a lot of platinum.
That is incredible. I don't know how many copies had to be sold for that number. I could look it up real quick, but it is a lot. His single, Big Poppa, was nominated for a Grammy for the best solo performance that year. For that to have been on his first album is insane. Like, that song, probably the most recognizable song he's ever done.
Oh,
and
yeah,
he
absolutely.
was not a one-hit wonder. Like, that was just the first of many songs that he would be known for.
I mean, it's in the top tier of top recognized songs of all time. When you hear it, you just know what it is.
So ultimately, the album shifted attention back to East Coast hip hop. And that same year, Biggie formed the hip hop group Junior Mafia, which included some of his friends from childhood. You may have known these people as Lil Kim and Lil Cease. Lil Kim, one of the most recognizable names of my childhood as well.
I don't know Lil Cease, but I do know Lil Kim when Lil Jon, Lil Jamie were running around when all this was happening. It's a lot of little. We're going to take a break. When we get back, we'll talk about Biggie becoming friends with Tupac and then how that led down the road to both of them losing their lives. Around the time Biggie formed the Junior Mafia and he released his debut album, Ready to Die, that's when he met and became friends with fellow rapper Tupac Shakur. We've talked about Tupac, did an episode on that, and there's some movement in that case, which is wild. Many people would say that they became really, really close. Tupac would call Biggie. He talked to his mama. He'd call Brooklyn and hang out with Biggie and Lil Kim. Biggie went on to stay with Tupac whenever he went out to the West Coast to do a recording or to do any part of his tour. At one point, Biggie asked Tupac to become his manager. And apparently, Tupac said, nah, stay with Puff. He'll make you a star. Puff being Diddy. But 1994, their friendship came to an abrupt end. On November 30th of that year, Tupac was going to visit Biggie at Quad Studios and was attacked by robbers when he got there. Tupac was shot 5 times and lost thousands of dollars worth of jewelry. When Biggie and his Junior Mafia group came down to the scene, Tupac gave them the middle finger. He believed that Puff Daddy and Biggie had set him up and brought him over there to be killed. And that kind of ended their friendship. We look back at it now as an East Coast, West Coast rivalry. It was really personal just between these two people for this incident. Biggie would reply and say, I had nothing to do with it. It just happened to be a coincidence that he was in the studio.
Do you think that's legit? Like, do you think it was just a coincidence and Tupac thought it was them that were behind it? Or
Man, with everything we know about Diddy now, he was not signed to Diddy's label. He was a competitor. I would not be surprised at all if Sean Combs had something to do with it. I would also not be surprised if he didn't tell Biggie about it. I don't know if Biggie would have approved of that. There's nothing in his past up to this point to suggest that he would do that. But yeah, I don't know. It's so I tend to think yes to Diddy and no to Biggie. What do you think?
I think Biggie and Tupac were tight before this. I think Tupac just took this personal, and it may not have had anything to do with Biggie. But yeah, I could for sure see that Puff could have been behind it.
And to be clear, that didn't kill Tupac. That's not how he died. But that fueled the fire.
I mean, at the same time, sorry, I'm just going down this rabbit hole. Like, Puff may not have even had anything to do with it. It could just be like wrong place, wrong time thing. But this ended up ruining a friendship and then led to a lot worse.
It did. It became a brutal rivalry in a number of ways. Somebody else ended up confessing to that attack, a guy named Dexter Isaac in 2012. So not everybody believes that Biggie was in on it at the time. But again, that kind of separated their friendship. And that's where it really put us in the rap wars of the 90s between East Coast and West Coast.
Tupac got in trouble for a sexual assault. He was charged and he would serve some time in jail for that. And once he got out of jail, he would end up signing with a record label called Death Row Records, one of the most infamous record labels like of my childhood. And the manager of that was named Suge Knight. So I'm sure if you know anything about 90s hip hop, that name sounds familiar. So this sealed Tupac and Biggie as being rivals. Like, this was the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. So it was revealed that Tupac allegedly also knew about all the sexual abuse allegations against Puffy and had no respect for him. So he did not have any interest, or one, being around Biggie anymore, but also to not go back to the label to be a part of Puffy. It also didn't help that after the attack on Tupac, Biggie released the song Who Shot Ya? Now, Tupac took this as a diss track. But according to Lil Cease, the song was not intended to be a comment on the shooting, and actually stated that Tupac knew the song wasn't about him and was around at the time that it was written. But Tupac still retaliated with making his own diss track back at Biggie called Hit 'Em Up. And in that song, this is probably known as one of the greatest diss tracks in hip hop history. Tupac calls out Biggie by name and even claims that he slept with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans. Now, in 2014, Faith Evans was interviewed by MTV and said that Tupac did hit on her once after a recording session, but she said, quote, "But that ain't how I do business," end quote. So according to her, none of those claims are true. So, but yeah, Tupac with some verbal shots fired.
Yeah, and I said I don't fully believe that Biggie had anything to do with shooting Pac, but if you're going to put that song out, even if it's not intended to be at him, you have to know it's going to be taken that way given the circumstances. So it ended up being really good for business, probably for both of them. And I think a lot of these feuds over the years have been faked for that publicity. Not this one. This was real. But I think that, I don't like that was released and he tried to say he didn't know how it would be taken, because I think that's a pretty easy thing to figure out. Biggie's group, the Junior Mafia, put out their next album on August 29th, 1995. And by the end of that year, Biggie was the biggest selling solo male artist on the Billboard charts. Not just hip hop, but that includes pop and R&B. The following year, on September 7th, 1996, that's when Tupac was shot 4 times in a vehicle in Las Vegas. He died in the hospital 6 days later. We have covered that in detail in another episode, so please go check that out. But according to Faith, Biggie's wife, that night he called her in tears. Even though they had fallen out, he hated that Tupac had been killed. But given everything that was going on between them, he decided not to go to the funeral. And this is a quote from Biggie. He said, "It's a funny thing. I kind of realized how powerful Tupac and I was. We two individual people, we waged a coastal beef." You know what I'm saying? One man against one man made a whole West Coast hate a whole East Coast and vice versa. And that really bugged me out. Like, dude don't like me, so his whole coast don't like me, and I don't like him, so my whole coast don't like him. It let me know how much strength that I have. And then he said that he has to be the one, since he created it, to flip it, because he said, I got to take the weight on both sides. Pac can't be the one to try to squash it. So he kind of acknowledged the power of their rivalry, and I think given the rivalry would not have been as big if they weren't as close as they had been. So this is a very intimate, emotional situation. And, you know, we're still trying to figure out who shot Tupac. We think we know there's somebody going to be on trial for being a part of it. But Biggie, at least on the surface, seemed to be upset about it.
I also just want to reiterate, like, this was a very public feud. This was all over the place back then. Back when MTV played music and did some shows, like, you knew there was a West Coast versus East Coast rivalry going on.
And even on the West Coast, I mean, go watch the movie Straight Outta Compton. It'll give you a breakdown of how that group broke up, and like people were going at each other in songs. And now everything, all songs, I feel like, are just like, hey, let's do this or do that. It's not like then they were talking to people individually going at them. And I kind of miss that.
Yeah. I want to pause for just a second and ask you on the record, take out the whole rivalry thing. I don't want to say whose side are you on, but as far as just music goes, are you more of a Tupac or Biggie guy?
You know, I recognize that Tupac probably was better, but I enjoy Biggie's songs more.
See, that's interesting. I'm the opposite. Yeah. I liked Tupac more. So I was a West Coast guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Something about Biggie's songs, I don't know. They didn't seem as angry all the time. Tupac was a mad dude.
Yeah, maybe that's why I don't know. I liked it because of that. All right, going back to it. So while Biggie was recording his second album, that would be called Life After Death, he and Lil Cease actually were arrested for public marijuana use, which you would never get arrested for nowadays in most of these states we're talking about. And they also had Biggie's car repossessed as part of that. So that night they got out, they bonded out. Biggie decided to rent a car, and the two ultimately ended up crashing that car into a railing. So in that wreck, Lil Cease ended up fracturing his jaw, and Biggie broke his leg. He actually had to be confined to a wheelchair for a few months. And when he would get out of that, he would be seen using a cane. I don't know if you remember seeing him go to the cane or not, but I do.
I don't, but a lot of that, I mean, comes from his size. It's a lot harder to recover an appendage when you're putting 300 pounds on a broken
Shots
leg.
fired.
I'm sorry. It's science. It's not me.
So through it all, through his recovery, he would continue to work on this album. And in the middle of all of that, on October 29th, 1996, Faith gave birth to Biggie's son, Christopher C.J. Wallace Jr. So the album would be finished up in January of 1997 and was set to release on March 25th. In February, Biggie and his crew went to California in order to promote the new album. On March 8th, 1997, Biggie had canceled his trip to Europe, and he was itching to get out of his hotel, so he convinced everyone to go to the Soul Awards after party at the Peterson Automotive Museum company sponsored by Quincy Jones's Vibe magazine. I remember that one for sure. So this seemed like a safe enough place to go and take his crew.
Yeah, and remember, he is out on the West Coast here, but Tupac's been gone for almost a year, and I mean, things haven't necessarily slowed down, but this is a place that he felt safe going to. When he got there, it seemed like things were going well. There had been some gang members that were able to get in, but Biggie was just kind of hanging out, enjoying champagne, hanging out with Aaliyah, Missy Elliott, and Russell Simmons. The venue soon got too overcrowded, and around 12:23 a.m., the fire department had to break up the party. So, breaking code violations, too many people in this museum. After taking a few pictures outside, Biggie and Puff and others went downstairs to their rented Chevy Suburbans. Puffy jumped. I feel ridiculous saying Puffy. I'll just say Diddy. Diddy jumped into the first of the 3 cars with a few bodyguards. Biggie hopped in the front seat of the second car that was driven by Gregory Young and 2 more friends in the back. As they took off, Diddy's SUV blew through the first yellow lights, leaving Biggie's car idling at the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue. So if you can picture this scene, most of us have done kind of the caravan travel. You're traveling with friends in different cars. The rule is to kind of stay together, slow down if you have to, don't speed through a light. Diddy took off. He was getting out of there, and looking back seems to be creating distance between himself and Biggie at the time. The driver of an Impala that pulled up to Biggie's car was wearing a blue suit and a bow tie. He looked over at Biggie, he made eye contact, pulled out a gun, and fired at the car. Then the shooter sped off on Wilshire while Diddy hopped out of his SUV and then turned around and ran back to Biggie. He found his friend hunched over, tongue out, bleeding on the dashboard with multiple gunshot wounds.
The driver that was carrying Biggie would just drive him immediately to a hospital nearby. Once there, it would take 6 people to get him out of the car and put him on a gurney to be rushed into the hospital. And despite all of this fast medical attention that was happening, Biggie had been shot 4 times, and he ended up being pronounced dead at 1:15 a.m. It would actually be 15 years before his autopsy would be made public, and it only showed one of those bullets to be fatal. That bullet ended up going through his thigh and then into his chest and pierced several vital organs as it made that path. Biggie was just 22 years old when he died. And I'm going to be honest, man, in my memory, I just feel like he looked like he was 40 something. That's my memory of him was being, there's no way I would have thought he was only 22.
And his impact was so big. There weren't a lot of people that young that were that well known. So that is surprising to think about that looking back. Also, I feel like we looked at old people as being super old all the time. So that may have just been us.
So his funeral was held on March 18th at the Frank E. Campbell Funeral Home in Manhattan. There were over 350 people there, some recognizable names in the hip-hop scene, and like key components of my childhood music-wise were Lil' Kim, of course Lil Cease was there, Queen Latifah, Flava Flav, Mary J. Blige, Run DMC, Busta Rhymes, and Salt and Pepper were there. That was
Peppa.
I said Pepper, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah, Salt and Peppa, sorry. 16 days after his death, Biggie's album Life After Death was still released, and it almost immediately went quadruple platinum and was the highest selling release of 1997, and all of which he wasn't alive for. It was one of the most high selling rap albums of all time. Life After Death debuted number 1 on the Billboard Top 200. And then in mid-1997, Puff Daddy, Diddy, released his very first album, and it was called No Way Out. So on that album, the second track was called I'll Be Missing You. This was probably one of the most recognizable songs of that year. I felt like it played on every radio station every day, 10 times an hour. I felt like it was just huge. And in that song, it was Diddy, Faith Evans, Biggie's ex-wife, and then 112. And it was dedicated to Biggie. It was a worldwide hit. And I'm sure you remember that song even in Harlan.
Yeah, I mean, I would recognize it if I heard it now. I think it stole or borrowed some music from I'll Be Watching You.
Yes.
So there was that little bit of still when they come on, I can't tell which is which there for a little bit. Rolling Stone later reported the person who shot Biggie was a black guy in a blue tuxedo and a bow tie. But nobody has ever been arrested or charged for the murder of Biggie Smalls. Immediately after the shooting, reports came out linking Biggie's murder with Tupac's murder. So a lot of people tried to say that they were related in some way. Media speculated that they were connected because they were both essentially drive-by shootings. So similar MO of a potential killer here. And they were both involved in the same feud, but they were on opposite sides of the feud. So if this was about East Coast, West Coast, I don't know if the same person is going to be going at them. Now, it may not have been about East Coast, West Coast. It may have been about money, which is, I assume, what it is about. An LA Times report initially said that the prime suspect for Biggie's murder, was a member of the South Side Crips, again, with a personal financial motive. The investigation stalled, though, and nobody was ever formally charged. This will become the theme of the case, stalled investigations. So let's talk about some theories about who may have killed Biggie. I mentioned the Crips. I mean, I feel like people joke about it a lot now, but there are gangs that still exist. And the Bloods and the Crips were kind of the main ones. You wore red or you wore blue. And that was very well known in the 90s. I don't know if I went and asked my teenage kids if they would know what I was talking about right now, but when I was their age, I would have said I knew exactly what they were saying. In this situation, there are two main theories. One is from the initial investigator, whose name was Russell Poole, and one was from later investigator named Greg Kading. Truthfully, the Kading theory is widely criticized for having a very flimsy basis, but let's dig into both a little bit.
All right, so there was a lead investigator on the case, LAPD police officer Russell Pohl, and he was the lead investigator as soon as this case opened up. And I will say this did not make him a very popular person in the LAPD. So let me explain why. Several months into the investigation, his main suspect was the owner of Death Row Records, Suge Knight. Poole alleged that Suge had orchestrated the entire murder with the help of two dirty LAPD police officers, David Mack and Rafael Perez. He discovered that the two of them were working security for Death Row when they were off duty, and they were also members of the Blood Gang. That's a pretty big allegation if it's true. He also uncovered that a man who matched the description of the shooter, this man was named Amar Muhammad, and he happened to be the godfather to David Mack's children. So these pieces are really fitting together if this is all true. Poole had also released statements by several witnesses. Mack and Perez were at the party with Biggie and his crew, and he had witnesses to put them there. And he showed all of this in his work to the police chief of the LAPD, Bernard Parks. Parks instructed his officer Poole to cease all investigation into Mack and Perez. And so all of this work, if all of this is legitimate, he showed it to his boss, the chief of police, and he was told to stop. So because of the way that all of this was handled, he ended up retiring from the LAPD. Poole did, and that would be in 1999. And after he retired, the case ultimately stalled out, but Poole kept investigating even into his retirement as an off-duty police officer.
Yeah, and this, to me, gives the image of the classic, you have a pushpin board with red string tying all these people together, of trying to put together who was involved or who knew what. And, of course, this was a closed-door meeting, so all we have is the report from Poole telling him to not investigate the officers any further. We don't know that to be the case, but there was a lot of violence in the hip-hop world, and Suge Knight was known for being a very direct and very violent guy. Further investigation came back and said that the night Biggie died, Diddy's bodyguard, Eugene Deal, said that he saw a person who was dressed like a Nation of Islam member. Blue suit, light blue shirt, and blue bow tie, and that was his description. He says this person had a gun and approached them. Then he just turned and walked away as if he realized, oh, you're not who I was looking for. Later, Eugene was brought in to look at security footage and identified the man from his memory, saying, yes, that's the guy I saw in the blue suit. For some reason in the video, and this was, again, the late 90s, the video wasn't great. You really couldn't make out the man's face. Now, the LAPD would say that this footage never existed. 3 years later, Eugene was given a lineup by documentary filmmakers, so people out there, civilians trying to get information about this, and he picked out the man from the parking garage in that lineup, and the LAPD never gave him that lineup to look at. So this was done as a lineup should be issued. There was no prior knowledge of who he was going to be looking at. As it turns out, the man that Eugene picked out was Amir Muhammad, who happened, like you said, to be the godfather of David Mac's children. So a connection to Mac, who is a direct connection to Suge, and you put all the red strings together, and I think you got something that's more than a coincidence.
Well, I mean, I mentioned that Mac, these guys were potential members of the Blood Gang. Well, listen to this. So in November of 1997, that would be 8 months after Biggie's murder, Mac was actually arrested for robbing a bank in downtown LA. He pulled out a gun in this bank. He took $700,000 in cash in a duffel bag, and that money was never found. He told everyone in jail that he was a Blood Gang member and not to mess with him. So he ended up being sentenced to 14 years in prison for that armed bank robbery. The only person who ever visited him in jail, you got any guesses of who that was?
It was Amir Muhammad.
Yep.
It was the godfather of his kids, who some people think pulled the trigger on Biggie.
After the robbery, law enforcement raided Mac's home and found significant evidence tying him back to Biggie's murder. Mac had been the owner of a dark-colored 1995 Impala with chrome wheels. So this was the same one that was described at the scene of the crime the night that Biggie was killed. There was a gun that was found in the home that matched the description of the gun that was used to shoot at Biggie's car. And again, that was also found in Mac's home. In the garage, there were boxes and boxes of German-made GECO bullets, and Biggie was killed by a bullet matching these descriptions. So Poole, who had not yet retired at that point, was not permitted by the LAPD to look into Mac's finances or to run forensics on that Impala that was found. So a lot of details that just all signs point to Mac being involved, right?
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of evidence, maybe even more than circumstantial. That's not a common type of ammunition. If they're going to try to pin that back to somebody, I think you're going to be lucky to find anybody with it, and it happened to be this guy who Poole was already suspicious of. Let's talk about Rafael Perez a little bit. He was caught stealing close to $1 million worth of cocaine from the evidence locker at LAPD and selling it on the street. He later admitted to intimidating suspects, planting evidence when he thought he needed to, and giving false statements in court to make his arrests and charges stick. He was seeking a lesser sentence for all of this, so he went to the DA and said that he had information on several dirty cops in the Rampart Division of LAPD. He named more than 20 guys who were all investigated, and it turns out the allegations were found to be faulty and that Perez had made them up, and he was just trying to use this false information to get out from under the charges. This investigation became known as the Rampart Scandal, and that truly smothered the investigation of the cops working for death row. So there was no more pursuit of that. This took precedent, and everything that Poole believed may have happened was kind of swept under the rug.
Years later, there was another investigator looking into this case, and he came across a photo of Mac and Perez dressed head to toe in red, which would make sense with the Blood Gang stuff, right? And there was a woman between them in a red dress. They were holding a cake in front of them that read Blood's Rule. And it was determined that the woman who was standing in the middle of those guys was the daughter of Bernard Parks, who was then the LAPD police chief. The photo was turned over as potential evidence to the LAPD, but surprise, surprise, it has gone missing. The case continued to consume Poole's life even after he retired. In 2015, Poole was at a meeting at the LA County Sheriff's Department about the Tupac and Biggie murders when he had a sudden aneurysm and died. That's insane, man. Those who have continued this work say that they think Puffy was the actual intended target, not Biggie. Retired FBI agent Phil Carsons says, quote, based on all the interviews, all the evidence, on the photos, everything, there was police involvement, and Suge Knight financed a retaliation for people killing Tupac. And his intention, he had a major beef with Puffy, end quote. He also said that Suge ruled with an iron fist and he had a bigger ego than the Pacific Ocean. And he saw his number one talent, his big cash cow, get killed in Vegas. And that's when he put things into motion.
And, this may have been, I don't know, that logically makes sense given the temperature of what was happening in hip hop at the time. So it was, the rivalry was still going strong and they were on the West Coast. So the attack may have been, hey, there's some East Coast guys from Bad Boy Records. Let's go shoot up that car. And maybe they didn't care who the target was. Maybe it was a Puffy or Biggie thing. Anyway, the criminal investigation into Biggie's murder was reopened in July of 2006 to look for new evidence because Biggie's mom had brought a civil suit against the city for not solving the murder or protecting him. Detective Greg Kading, who we mentioned earlier, was brought in because he had worked for 3 years on a gang task force and had information about the ways that gangs operated in the city of Los Angeles. Kading alleged that Biggie was shot by Wardell Faust, whose nickname was Poochie. Faust was an associate of Suge Knight and was in the Mob Piru gang. At the time that Biggie was killed, Suge Knight was in a county jail, so in order for him to put that hit on Biggie, he needed a liaison. Kading claimed that this liaison was a woman who was visiting him in jail. The LAPD and the FBI took this woman's statement in 2009 under the condition of keeping her anonymous and not identifying who she was. Kading said this woman visited Suge Knight under a false pretense of being his legal assistant, which allowed her to have an unmonitored visit where Kading believes he gave the order for her to help coordinate Biggie's murder for an undisclosed amount of money. Suge has never made a public comment about this. Faust died in 2003 after being shot in the back while riding his motorcycle. Kading also says he believes Tupac was killed under Diddy's orders, though the evidence may or may not have been pointed in that way, depending on how you look at things right now. Kading said, I certainly think it's a closed case, and they ought to satisfy history by saying this in the facts, and this is why we can't prosecute it, but it is solved. Basically claiming here that this was retaliation on the East Coast because it's believed that they ordered the hit on Tupac, so the West Coast ordered a hit on Biggie, and that is what it is, and people aren't going to talk, so let's just forget about it, I feel like is what he's saying.
In December of 1999, Bad Boys Records released Born Again. This featured previously unreleased material from Biggie. I remember when this came out, and it was kind of an emotional release day. Do you remember all that? So his mother was the driving force in finding justice for her son. The family actually filed 2 wrongful death lawsuits, one in 2002, the other later in 2007, both alleging that the LAPD did not do enough to protect their loved ones, and claimed that through the work of corrupt officers, they were involved in his murder. And that's when Kading conveniently found a scenario that did not involve the LAPD. So the first lawsuit ended in a mistrial, and the second one didn't even make it to court. It was dismissed.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate for her. Like, I assume he had a lot of money, but And who knows if she was doing this for the money or to try to just raise awareness and put some pressure on people to do further investigation. Who knows? But she was unsuccessful on her 2 trips to civil court. As of today, Biggie's still considered one of the best rappers of all time, and he's credited as being the savior of East Coast hip hop. The Source magazine named him the greatest rapper of all time in 2002. MTV ranked him as number 3 on their list of the greatest MCs of all time in 2006, calling him the most skillful ever on the mic. In 2015, Billboard named Biggie the greatest rapper of all time. His family established the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation, which hosts an annual black tie charity event called Big Night Out, B.I.G, Night Out. They raise funds for children's educational resources. In this instance, B.I.G stands for Books Instead of Guns. There's a mural of Biggie near his childhood neighborhood on Fulton Street. No arrests have ever been made for his murder, and it remains one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American history and especially in the music industry.
Yeah, man, I mentioned before that I thought Biggie was a lot older. He was only 22 years old. Tupac was only 25. And like you said, when we were kids, they were older than us, even though we were like young teenagers at the time. They just seemed so much older. So just their brains were not fully developed yet. If they could have gotten a little older and matured a little more and stopped the East Side, West Side shenanigans, they could still be putting out some great albums today. I mean, those that were working with them, excluding P. Diddy, we're not going to talk about him, but like Jay-Z, Busta Rhymes, I mean, some of those guys are still putting out content, so they could very well still be making music today. But this rivalry, if you will, just ended up ultimately taking both of their lives. Jamie, you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a trial that it will start happening soon for those responsible for Tupac. Is that correct?
It has been postponed. The sole suspect, who is the only person being implicated and charged right now, is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, and they've pushed that trial up to February of 2026. So nothing there yet, but I think we're going to learn a lot from that trial, if it does go to trial, about other things happening around these notable figures. So maybe we will get some more information about what happened to Biggie at the time.
I'm hoping that case will, kind of give us information on both Tupac and Biggie's, but I guess we'll wait and see.
Biggie's mom never gave up the fight for justice, but she did pass away in February of this year of 2025. So she's no longer out there trumpeting the cause to solve his murder, and she never got to see the answers for what happened to her son. So certainly heartbreaking on that end. And yeah, I feel like we heard a lot, or at least I heard a lot more about Tupac's murder growing up than I did Biggie's. And maybe that's because it happened in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip, whereas this was kind of coming out of a parking structure. I don't know what the reason was, but certainly some details here that I didn't know. I do think this can be solved. I think there are people alive that know exactly what happened. Will it be solved? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it will, or at least I hope so. But yeah, man, this was all the news when we were kids. Like you said, I was a little shielded from some of the details, but all I knew is that 2 artists that were putting out some really good content were gone way before their time. So, man, this has been an interesting one.
Yep, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. Hope you found this as interesting as we did, and continue to send us those case recommendations. Unfortunately, there is no shortage of content and true crime, but we want to make sure we cover the cases you want to hear.
Guys, we appreciate you, and until next crime, this has been True Crime Cast.
You've listened to True Crime Cast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.